Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. My name is Saja Ross, and I'm part of the team at Sufuuf al-Khayr, roseofgoodness.com. I want to begin by thanking you as parents and caregivers for taking time out of an already full week to be here. We know you are carrying a lot: school schedules, activities, work, and underneath it all, that quiet concern about your children's faith and future. Sufuuf al-Khayr was born exactly from that concern. We asked ourselves, how can we help parents keep their children's hearts close to the Qur'an and give them real Arabic in a way that fits the reality of family life in the West? Not a heavy program that adds more stress, and not a token class that children forget as soon as they log out, but something calm, structured, and genuinely nurtured. Our answer was a small, focused online institute for kids, built around 3 simple tracks. Arabic for Kids, a gradual story-based program that builds reading, writing, and comprehension so children start to think in Arabic from early years. Qur'an, recitation, and tajweed, one-on-one guidance to help them recite clearly and beautifully with proper pronunciation and rules at a gentle pace. Qur'an memorization, hifz, a guided pathway that combines steady revision, realistic goals, and a constant emphasis on love for the words of Allah. Everything is designed for children growing up in Western environments. Short recorded lessons to preview at home, then focused 30-minute one-on-one sessions for correction, confidence, and connection. Parents are not sidelined, but rather made as key partners. We keep our schedule realistic, 10 to 15 minutes a day, so families can actually sustain it long term. Our name, Sufuuf al-Khayr, means Rose of Goodness. The hope is that, inshallah, the children who pass through our classes will one day stand in those rows, grounded in character, fluent in recitation, and at ease with the language of the Qur'an. Today's gathering is part of that same vision. We didn't invite you here to listen to a sales pitch. We invited you because we believe that what happens in the home between mothers, fathers, and children is even more important than what happens in any online class. We wanted to create a space to reflect on that foundation together. So this evening, we're honored to host Ustadha Sahl, who will be elucidating us on the topic of the day: mothers, fathers, and the Qur'an, shared responsibility in nurturing young Muslim children. We'll be reflecting on how children absorb faith from the atmosphere of their home, how they watch our habits, hear our voices, and feel our priorities long before they learn their first tajweed rule. After the talk, if you feel that Sufuuf al-Khayr might be a good partner for your family's journey, you're very welcome to visit roseofgoodness.com or book a short placement consultation with us. But for now, we simply invite you to listen, to reflect, and to see what speaks to your own situation. Before we begin, just a brief introduction to our guest this evening. Ustadha Sahl is a dear friend and mentor of ours. She was born and raised in New Zealand and has spent decades in Turkey, Egypt, and Jordan dedicated to studying and teaching the Islamic sciences. She has trained with senior scholars in Hanafi fiqh, Aqidah, Hadith, terminology, tajweed, tafsir, and Arabic. And today she teaches, supports her husband Sheikh Hamim Keller from her home in Amman. We're honored to have her with us this evening and ask Allah to place benefit in her words. With that, bi'idhnillah, let's begin. Sahl, the floor is yours.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh to everybody. So many of the questions and answers in our talk today I covered in an ongoing, could say, discussion that happened here in Amman, in Zawiya, probably more than 15 years ago, probably around 2010, 2011. And this discussion is available, most of it, there's still more even that have to be edited and uploaded, in a series called Raising Muslim Children that's available on the website Unto the One. So these are public lectures that you can, it's under public lectures. So what happened, I'd like to introduce how we started doing Raising Muslim Children because it may be of interest to everybody. So a number of people had come to live in Jordan, and at that time, a lot of them were young and just married, and they started to have children. And I was watching what was going on with the children. And since most of these people were Western, we've always had a mixed cultural background in our community with the Arabs, people from India and Pakistan, and from the Western countries. They're the main three groups. So I was looking at the majority of these young Western people, and I saw that they were depending entirely on literature from their English literature, from their Western backgrounds about how to raise their children. And I noticed that there was a lot of teaching and practices that were being laid down in the hearts of these children that were not Islamic. So I'll just give one or two examples that stood out at the time. So, for example, two adults would be speaking and a child would come, and one of the parent of the child would turn away from the adult and address the child in fear that he's going to hurt or injure the child by not responding to his immediate need. And he ignored the adult. So this is something that you might take from a Western tarbiyah book, but it's a very, very un-Islamic practice because you're teaching the child to disrespect adults, that he has a priority over his elders, that he doesn't have to wait in life for anything, that his needs and his priorities are more important than anybody else. And on top of that, he doesn't learn social graces, that the thing to do when two people, regardless of whether they're adult or not, regardless of whether you're a child or not, even if you're an adult, you don't just go up to someone and interrupt a conversation and expect that everyone should stop because of you. As the social grace here is that you go up to the two people and you stand there and you wait until they disengage, and that the person that you want to speak to then turns to you and asks you what it is. So I gathered all the people together and that had young children, and I told them, I said, I'd like you to know that what you're doing is going to be very detrimental for you down the line, because you're implanting in these children the culture and practices and manners and values and worldview of non-Muslim people who have a completely different culture and civilization than we do. And then you have to live with the end result, and it's not going to be something Islamic. So that led to us having a lesson, so to speak, or discussion. I led the discussion, but there was a lot of participation in it. Of the things that one of the first things that I told all the ladies when we came together was that your children don't belong to you. And I remember these young mothers, some with their infant children on their laps, maybe their first child, and they're very much in love with their child, of course, it's natural, and see this child as their own. And I remember the majority of the people looking at me with a confused look on their face. I said, these children are an amana from Allah. They belong to Allah. They don't belong to you. And you will be asked about your amana. So, there are rights and obligations that you have towards your children and they have towards you, and you love one another and you share your lives, but you don't own them. They belong to Allah. They're an amana from Allah. And so that was where we started from. That's where what I would like to mention to everybody here today is that the first thing that you have to do in relation to your children is understand that they belong to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They're an amana in your hands, and you have to raise them to the best of your ability. In those sessions, one of the things that I most emphasized, and I continue to emphasize when I give anybody advice about raising children and having a successful family, is that the most important matter in a successful family is a successful marriage. So anything that you want to convey to your children cannot be done when there is not a relationship of mutual respect between you and your spouse, and there is not mawadda and rahma, any kindness and love, and a shared vision and a shared ability to carry this amana. So of the things that we did, we listened to some recordings from Sheikh Hassan al-Hindi in Arabic on raising Muslim children. And so I would play it and then translate it and then explain it to everybody. So Sheikh Hassan al-Hindi, he said, before having children, there are some things that you need to do to hope for righteous progeny. And so of the first things is to make lots of dua even before you get married for a righteous spouse. And serve other Muslims so that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala might give you tawfiq in your own needs. So when you fulfill the needs of others. And he emphasized this matter of the happy home, the happy marriage. And he said that this is a point that most people neglect when raising their children, because they're involved with providing the right environment, physical environment, and healthy environment, and a place for the kids to play outside, and let's make it hijrah to a Muslim country so the kids can be raised in a Muslim country. It's a good thing to do if you can. Memorizing the Qur'an, teaching them Arabic, and these are all wonderful things. But if you don't have a happy home, how are you going to carry it all through? And when your kids grow up, what they're going to remember more than anything else is that atmosphere in their home of their day-to-day life. And so if the parents are fighting with one another, they have anger, they don't have good character, they're not, they don't have, their hearts aren't together, then why would your kids believe that Islam is the answer, even though they are personally learning the Quran and they are learning Arabic and they're living amongst Muslims and they're going to the masjid, but they don't have a happy home? So what could possibly happen is that they'll say, oh, Islam doesn't work. And if you happen to live in a Western country, then you have a lot of options to do other things. And unfortunately, in the United States, one in every 4 children from Muslim families leaves Islam because there are other options. So to begin our discussion today, I would encourage everybody to, number one, work on your own self, because that's the most important factor in influencing your children, that you have good akhlaq, you have good character, you have good manners, you are patient, you are self-sacrificing, you're not a complainer. So the better your akhlaq, then the more successful that your tarbiyah is going to be of your children. It's not about how much they've memorized or who they've met or where they've been and what books they've read. That's not the most important thing. The most important thing is that they learn the two matters, that the main reasons that people enter into paradise, from what the Prophet ﷺ told us. And he said, someone asked him, what are the things that will enter us into paradise, that enter into paradise? And he said, taqwallah and husnul khuluq, God-fearingness, keeping the limits of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and having good and refined character. So if you want your children to be successful in the dunya and the akhirah, then you must work on yourself to have taqwallah and husnul khuluq, and to strive with all your strength to have a successful marriage and to have love and affection with your spouse that then can be passed on to your children. And so if your children grow up in a happy household where they saw their parents being kind to one another, they saw their parents fearing Allah and keeping His limits, they saw their parents worshipping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and being afraid of displeasing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because there is goodness in their life, then those meanings of taqwa and husnul khuluq, all of that will be absorbed into the child's heart, and you can hope that inshallah Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will make them salihin people. So there's no guarantee, because even the Anbiya had children who did not follow their paths. And so Sayyidina Nuh alayhi salam, when he called his son to board the ship, the ark with him and the believers, his son refused. And Sayyidina Nuh, according to the commentators according to Tafsir, he didn't know that his son was a munafiq. So his son followed the time and place that he lived in. He wanted to be like everybody else. And so he was a munafiq. And so he didn't want to get on the boat, despite that Sayyidina Nuh alayhi salam was calling him. So this is one of the sons of the Anbiya. So there's no guarantee that your children will follow a path of Islam. And it's a terrible thing to say, but there is no guarantee. But you have a very, very high chance of being successful when you are a good example. So I have emphasized over the years, always told people, have a good marriage. A good marriage is more important, of course, that you're teaching your children to pray and you're teaching them halal and haram, but more than any other aspect of what you're going out of your way for the benefit of your children, is a successful marriage where the spouses respect each other. Now, I'd like to say that when children see their parents respect one another, and they can see that they have love and affection for one another, and they grow up in this calm household, it's very unlikely that it's very hard for them to disobey their parents, because obeying parents and loving them and pleasing them and being loyal towards them is of the fitrah. It's part of our basic human nature. And going against that is a real struggle inside the heart of a child or a teenager if they have only seen good from their parents. So in a more strict society than we'd say in Western countries, where people have less options, particularly in the past, it's very difficult to go outside of the norms of your culture and society. And then, you couldn't do something drastically different. No one would accept it. And then people's lives were more deeply connected, grandfathers and uncles and aunties and cousins and everybody. And, you belong to this big entity of people. And so you can't easily go against it. The larger polity of your extended family or tribe would not accept it. So it's of the fitrah, but it's much easier when you live in a small family and you see that your parents are not providing that environment where you have a loving home to decide to take another course of action. So anyway, that's our introduction. So we have some questions here. So we have questions first on connecting children to the Qur'an and non-Arabic speaking families in the West. How can we spiritually connect our children to the Qur'an when we are non-Arabic speaking families living in Europe or the West? And one of the most important things about learning any language is to be connected to that language consistently. So many, many years ago, more than 40 years ago, my Sheikh Sultan Baba, he said to me, learn Turkish, learn Turkish, learn Turkish, learn Turkish. So I started, and that back in those days, of course, there was no internet. I found a Teach Yourself Turkish book. I didn't have anyone to teach me at the time, and I was young and unfamiliar with languages. And so I started to, look at this Teach Yourself Turkish book, and I got some verbs right, and I would, do some Tarzan Turkish. But then I went to Egypt. I lived in Egypt for 3 years, and then I came to Jordan. I've been in Jordan since 1986. So I started learning Arabic. I tried to carry on with Turkish, doing a little bit here and there. And then of course, Arabic was the effort of a lifetime. That's my opinion on it. It's some people are more gifted in languages than others. Without being modest, I'm not being modest at all. I'm very average in language learning. Probably because one of the reasons I think is because I don't have a strong memory. And so languages depend on a lot of, the stronger your ability to memorize, then the better you will do. So anyway, the point is that after Sultan Baba passed away, I stopped my Turkish for about 20 years. And then I decided along the line there, now that there was online learning, that I wanted to go back to it, because I was sure that, I don't know what it is that's going to happen out of this, but I was sure, I am sure, inshallah, that because he insisted that I learn Turkish, there's going to be some kind of barakah that will one day come out of this. So I went online, I joined an online Turkish school, and I started taking lessons. Not that I had the time for it, but I decided better, for 20 years I had just spoken Turkish once a week, I would have eventually gotten it. So, and with him, the point is that I've been doing this for a few years now. I have a tutor online, and I just keep going at it, and we have conversations. She makes me read. I have to, do some homework and exercises, and I'm busy with another project right now, and my lessons at the school have run out. So I only have 2 more lessons. And my tutor is expecting a baby. So I said to her, well, look, you're going to have your baby, and I have to finish this project that I'm working on. So how about we meet again after 6 months? And so that was our original plan. But then I thought about it, and I said, if I stop this for 6 months, after all this effort, I'm just going to go backwards again. So we got into the conversation again in the last lesson we had. I just have once a week, 1.5 hour lesson. That's all they can manage. And I listen to a little bit of Turkish, during the week if I have some time. And so she was, I was saying to her, maybe she's going to have her baby, inshallah, right at the end of March, beginning of April. So that means all of Ramadan, we won't have a lesson, which is more convenient. And I said, okay, what do you think? You have your baby, and then we'll just have until I finish my project, let's just converse and maybe just read stuff together, but don't make me do any homework. Because I just need to focus on this project. I can't take another day out of my time to prepare in the morning until we have our lesson in the afternoon. So we agreed on that. And then she told me about a student of hers that I had heard about a couple of years ago, that she had an Austrian lady who was teaching. And this Austrian lady, I don't know, she just liked Turkish and liked, she actually used to watch Turkish movies. And so she liked Turkish and decided she wanted to learn Turkish. And she was taking a lesson every day for like 40 minutes every day, 5 days a week. And then once she got proficient, then she was taking a lesson 3 days a week. And she actually took an exam at one of the institutions in Istanbul, and got a a certificate that she was competent on that first in that grade, which is, it's a good grade in the system that they have. It's about 5th level. And my tutor, she told me, she contacted me, the Austrian lady, and said she wanted to go up to the next grade to get the certificate for the next grade, and so she'd like to renew her lessons. But my tutor said, but she'd actually forgotten a lot of her Turkish because she had left her lessons and was not able to retain what she had learned. And that is the secret of languages. If you're going to learn a language, you must keep doing it. And so, I'm not pulling a plug here for the organization. Nonetheless, I don't know how they teach, but they're nice people anyway. I'll tell you that. Alhamdulillah. But one of the ladies, a lady I know who gives private lessons in Arabic, Arab lady, I've seen her I know of some of the children that she taught who are living in Western countries. You have to be able to afford this, of course. It does take money to have private lessons. But some of the some of the children that she taught them over a number of years. And these children can read and write and speak in Arabic, and they read, write, and speak in Arabic and memorize the Qur'an. So it's truly, it's worth the effort. That's what I have to say. And it's difficult to learn a language, and you have to have a very good reason to learn a language. But if you decide that you want to learn a language, then you have to make a consistent effort to carry on learning and be connected to that language. And of course, if you understand Arabic, then you have a whole different perspective in seeing your deen, because when you read the Quran, you're reading the word of Allah. If you listen to tafsir, then you can understand what is being said. And a lot of tafsir goes back to discussion of terms in Arabic, terminology in Arabic, either in grammar or in rhetoric, or the expression, articulate expression of the Arabic language, which is called the balagha. And if you understand Arabic, or even just a little bit of Arabic, then you will get a more of appreciation. So, for example, Sheikh Noor has tafsir lessons, and I try to do the same thing when I teach tafsir also. Teach it in English, and even someone with just a little bit of Arabic can understand when one is explaining what's going on in the Arabic. Why is this preposition put ahead? Why is this word put after? Why is it singular? Why is it plural? So these details, what convey meaning and express the miraculous origin of the Quran, because you see how perfect it is. So even just a little bit of Arabic can make a huge difference. Now, with those little kiddies, because they've got little empty minds, well, just that's the way they are at that age. Minds are just empty. A medical student that I knew was studying here in Jordan, he told me he had one of his professors was a woman from Iraq, a neurologist, I think she was, he mentioned that she pointed out that the memory is like empty chambers in the child's mind. So if you imagine they're empty rooms, and you can fill them up, or if you don't fill them up, they just close and they're empty. There's nothing in them. And so it's a huge opportunity for the benefit of your children, for their future, and for the benefit of this ummah that you're providing. You're bringing people into this ummah who are educated and not ignorant, and have an opportunity for more learning, because they have the tool of it for religious and spiritual learning, which is Arabic. And so you have this opportunity if you have young children. And so, and it's really one of the most important things that you could ever do for your child, is to give him Arabic and the Quran. No question about that. I remember, some years ago, it was more than 20, it was probably 30 years ago, my goodness. Maybe let's just go back less, maybe 25 years ago, whatever, 1990s it was. And by that time, I'd been studying Arabic about 15 years, my goodness. Anyway, and in our day, there weren't the opportunities that people have today. There was very few institutions and not many textbooks, and so it was not an easy task. Anyway, I remember reading. We used to have cassette tapes in those days, and we say, like one of those old people say, back in the old days, when we were young. So that was still in the days of cassettes, and our friend Abu Munir, al-Khayr, he used to send us the lessons of Sheikh Abdurrahman, rahmatullah alayh. And I used to make a word for myself each morning. I would do my awrad and dhikr, and I would then listen to these cassettes. And so Sheikh Abdurrahman would read through a book of tasawwuf. And I remember at the time, the book that I was reading, it was called, and commentary by Ibn Ajiba, one of the sheikhs of our tariqah. He was a student of Sidi Arwid al-Qawi, and he was one of the prolific writers in the tariqah. So Ibn Ajiba, I was listening to Sheikh Abdurrahman reading the text and commentating on it, and I had the book in front of me, and I just said, subhanallah, if it took 20 years to learn Arabic in order to understand this book, it would have been worth it. So, and the book was, of course, talking about spirituality. And I said to myself, all these people in these Western countries who look at Buddhism and all of these different, mysticisms, it's like, man, the Muslims have it already laid out. Everything is already there. And it's just a matter of being able to access it. So there is a lot entering into our Islam, and this is something that I think we all need to revive, is the reality that we have our own civilization. we have a civilization. If we're not talking here about technology, okay, so we'll agree that the current civilization is ahead of us in technology, and that's something that can easily be learned, and the Muslims and people in the global south are already catching up and overtaking the Western nations, which is a good thing because we're all just sick of these Western colonial exploiting rotten nations. And I actually thought we have to promote a new word to express truth, and that is never use the word democracy again. Let's make a blend here and express the true system of politics that is ruling the world. It's called depocracy, and a blending of claims for democracy, whereas the reality is hypocrisy. So we want to use the same word, inshallah. Anyway, when a few years ago, when it's actually more than that now, but when we first started hearing about the LGBT slowly going into schools, we started to get complaints from people that our children are being exposed to these ideas. We started slowly. And what do we do? And then it started building up more until it was actually incorporated into the curriculum of many Western countries. And when that finally got to the point of full legalization for homosexual couples, and then to the mutilization of children who had not even reached puberty yet, to permanently mutilate them so they cannot reverse the mutilation without the permission of the parents, I said to myself, this civilization and culture is going to end. It's going to be destroyed by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that's what I actually believe that we're seeing right now. And so I believe that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to bring about things in the coming decades, and even quicker than that. We're going to see a lot of interesting things in the coming 10 years. And I think one of those things that we're going to see is that there's going to be a big economic decline in the Western countries, and a failure, a moral and economic failure in those countries. And so, inshallah, this is the time where we have to remind ourselves that we have our own moral code, we have our own legal system, we have our own family structures, we have our own culture. And so to develop our own civilization and our own cultures, and having access, what helps one to have access to that culture and to that civilization is the Arabic language. I believe one of the things that I've been thinking about also, because of the current work that I'm on, is that we don't need, I think that one of the things that should be happening in the Muslim world, and it is, but and inshallah it will expand more amongst Western Muslim people, is not just translations from Arabic to English, but that the concepts taken from our Islamic civilizational corpus be not rewritten, but that works be written based on that are appropriate in the language of our time. So Sheikh Noor is doing this in his his with Allah letters that he does. He puts them out once a month online, but he's making a book out of them. So this is a pure discussion in English. It's not a translation from Arabic, but it's talking about tafsir and concepts in Islam written in the English language for people who speak English. And so we need to take our Islamic civilization and not change it to fit into the current culture, but put it into a language and form that can be read and understood as relevant and something that we can apply in our day-to-day lives here and now. So we need, basically what I'm saying is, we've got to go back to Islam. Simple way of putting it. Our own civilization, our own family structures, our own roles, male and female roles, our interpretation of authority. There is hierarchy in our society. We are not a democracy. Everyone is not equal in our society in terms of social obligations and responsibilities. We are all equal before Allah, but we are not equal in our social roles and responsibilities. So we have submission in our culture, and of the submission is, of course, in our family structure. We have the leader, who is the man. It's not a partnership. It is a marriage. It's a contract. And the man is the leader. The wife is his lovely assistant. And the children must obey. The first one who is the leader is the wife must obey the husband in what is halal, depending on your madhab. And the children have to obey the parents, and of course, in what is halal. So, we're not going to go into the fiqh discussion of, what does that mean? We're talking about concepts here that our culture and our societies and our civilization is built on. So that's that question. Should you learn Arabic? Arabic makes a deeper connection. Now, that doesn't mean that someone who is a non-Arab will not have a higher level with Allah. So I've met many Turkish people in my tasawwuf in Turkey who were very pious people, hearts very connected to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and love the Qur'an, but they don't understand it when they read it. And so someone who understands it when they read it, and who can understand the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, they can hear and listen to the words that the Prophet ﷺ actually said. This person has more of an advantage if he wants to use it, because you can be a complete fasik, completely godless person, despite the fact that you speak Arabic. But it is a great opportunity. And in relation to children, also another point is that when you can't guarantee your children's guidance, but the first thing is trying to make sure you're guided so they can emulate you, inshallah. But when you give them all of this foundation, even if they go out in their teenage years charging into the dunya, dunya, here I come. Some of the kids here who grew up, their nufus wanted more dunya. And I remember one group of young boys, it's like they're dying to go to America. And so they go to America, and so they're staying in a house in America, in a neighborhood in America. And they say, okay, where's America? It's like, where's all the fun? It's like, but fun is about people and being able to do things with people. It's like not every day is going to be a carnival. So they got a big wake up call about what America is. So, but the grass is always greener on the other side of the fence, and when you see flashing lights, as a kiddie, you're going along the streets and you see the flashing lights and you say, oh, wow. But you don't see the rats that are hiding behind the city walls, behind the shop people, and the cockroaches. So anyway, but all those children that have, any of the children that have grown up with the Salat and with Qur'an and the hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, with dhikrina, there's something that is set in the foundation and the core of their hearts that it makes it very easy for them to turn back. So whereas for someone who didn't grow up, which many of us had this experience, that we weren't taught about Islam and we didn't know very much. And so we didn't know Islam was our answer. And so we had to go on a long journey to find that answer. And so I come from a background where Balkan Muslims, family is Albanian, but anyone who's Albanian or Bosnian will know from Montenegro, the Muslims, and even Bulgaria, the Muslims from that area, they lived under communism. The people before that were quite ignorant. And the people are being left with very, very little knowledge of the religion. So it's quite a hard journey to get back to find the truth. So one thing I did with my teenage nephews, I brought them here when they were 17 and 18, and you can imagine what a drama that was. So anyway, so I had to get out a wooden spoon, to try and whack them and kick them. I was trying to teach them the Fatiha or the Salat or whatever, and they were jumping around and like a bit of a joke, because they're all muscles at this age too, 17 and 18. So I was telling them, be quiet and simple. Anyway, but I made a point of bringing them here, took them on a holiday, took them traveling around. And but I taught them things myself, and I set up classes for them with other people, made sure that they knew that their Fatiha was correct, that they had a few small surahs from the Qur'an for their Salat, went through their Salat, because they would go to Jummah and they know how to pray Jummah or follow, but at that time they didn't know how to pray properly. So I went through the Salat, made sure they knew how to do it themselves. And I remember my 18-year-old nephew, when we'd finished everything, and he says, "Is that it?" And I said, "That's it." And he said, "Yeah." He was really actually just so excited that he now knew the Salat and he owned it, that he owned his own Salat, that he could do it on his own. And so the point that I just wanted to, I told them, I said, look, I brought you here because I want you to know if there's a point in your life. I said, I don't expect it. And, of course, at that age, they went on towards their own things. One of the two became more connected to Islam than the other. But I just said to them, look, there's a point in your life where you'll want to know the truth. And you want to have some spirituality in your life. And so this is what you return to. So you've already got it. So if you have had this, then you can return to it instead of having to look for it and try and find it. So I'm not speaking here to people who are now, today, to people who are on this level of beginner's level. But rather, all of you are people who are practicing Islam. I'm sure most of you have some background in Arabic, and you've learned your fiqh, and etc., and you're trying to learn more. The point is that if you were someone who started practicing as an adult or started learning as an adult, you know how hard it is to make that when you don't have that foundation. So you give your children, whether they use it or not, you give them a great head start in life and a great opportunity when you teach them Arabic and Quran at a young age, and you fill those chambers up with beneficial things that they can access for the rest of their lives. And so it's good to fill up, I have a personal, in these discussions that we had with the ladies, there's actually 81 lectures there. And in the later, maybe 10 or 15 of them, there are discussions about children's books and images that children look at. And so many Muslims are not aware of this, that they really fill their children's heads and hearts up with so much junk. And so instead of that, I would advise that you give them Islamic stories, you give them qasidas, let them sing all day, bang, bang, bang with their, drive you nuts. And, but, if they've got a tambourine and, deaf and they're singing and they memorize qasidas, memorize Qur'an, memorize hadith, this memorization fills the empty spaces in the heart and in the mind with things that are beneficial and are imprinted on them. So they don't need to memorize Humpty Dumpty sat on the wall, Humpty Dumpty had a great fall. Yeah, this is the junk that I have in my chambers from when I was a kid. Anyway, so if you want to give your children something of value, give them a tie to the word of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that will last for the rest of their lives, inshallah. And it's something, I don't say a tool because we're talking about the word of Allah, but it's the Arabic is, they call it actually in Arabic, from the ulum al-ala, the knowledges that are the tools for going into knowledge. So Arabic is the means. And it's a great gift, whether they appreciate it or use it. You did the wonderful thing of giving them that opportunity, which is tremendous, tremendous ni'mah. I remember some ladies, there was, some quite a number of years ago, they were almost obsessive with, giving their children organic food and everything, which is great. But it's like, man, all that time that you spend on the organic food, just treat your husbands nicely and spoil them and make them happy and make a nice atmosphere in your home and focus on your kids' learning. It's more important than the food that they eat. They have, don't give them poison, but, give them good food, give them healthy food. If you can do organic, great. But all that time that was being focused on the consumption of the food of these kids, if that time was spent in teaching and learning and in the things that will last and change their character over the years, it's more important. Okay, now it's question number 2. Quran is the natural reference point. How can we instill in our children such a connection to the Quran that as adults they naturally turn to it as their first point of reference for their questions, decisions, and life experiences? Well, Quranic learning means that the parents have to have some learning in the Quran. So if you can find lessons in tafsir, things that keep you connected to the Quran so that you refer to the Quran all the time. SubhanAllah, Abu Ubaidah, the spokesman for the resistance, who recently died. So once he died, martyred, it was known, his identity was known. And so his family, the people who survived, spoke about him. And they said that most of his speech was the Quran, always referring back to the Quran, always referring back to the Quran. In nearly 100 years of struggle against occupation, the people of Palestine were not able to overcome their conquerors, except this generation. And what is the difference of this generation? It's the tie to the Quran. So the people of Gaza, in terms of the memorization of the Quran, they have the largest percentage of any group, of any populace in the world of people who have memorized the Quran. And I was listening to a podcast with an Egyptian journalist from Jazeera. His name is Ahmed Mansour. And this was after the very Mubarak person, after he was martyred. And so the 2 of the people who had known him for long years and been in prison with him also, they said that when he used to, after he was released from prison, he was involved in the administration of Hamas, with the government, elected government of Gaza, that when they used to get money coming in, he would spend half of it for the Quran, for the institutions and support of people learning and memorizing the Quran. And this reminds me of another point, and that is that all of these people that have undertaken this great task of liberating Masjid al-Aqsa and the Ardul Mubarakah, the blessed land, from these terrible occupiers, they're all people of tahajjud. They're people who, and if there were Yahya Sinwar, when he was in prison, he would go to bed straight after Isha, and he would get up about 2 hours before Fajr. So anyone who wants to accomplish anything great in life, that is pleasing to Allah and prepare for the akhirah, should be a person that has tahajjud. And so Ismail Haniya also, his son said that his father always prayed tahajjud. Even if he only had time to do 2 rakas, just get up and do 2 rakas, he still did it. So that's the key to success, that Allah is with you, inshallah. So this is the parents should have a tie to the Qur'an, so that the children see that the parents refer to the Qur'an, quote the Qur'an, think with the directives of the Qur'an, submit to the commands of the Qur'an, and so the children will pick this up. It's more important than you should take advantage of the children being able to memorize the Quran in their young age, but the love of the Quran and the connection to the Quran will come from the example of the parents. Questions on tarbiyah, fear of Allah and character, fear of Allah and children. What is the best way to cultivate khawf and consciousness of Allah in children without making them fearful in an unhealthy way? Again, it's the example of how you feel about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because children will live in that atmosphere of, my mother didn't do this because she said, no, this is not pleasing to Allah. Allah has made this haram. This is something that Allah loves. Let's say Bismillah when we go out. Let's make a niyyah for the sake of Allah. So when you grow up in this atmosphere of constantly making niyyah for Allah, being reminded that all of our blessings come from Allah, that we're here in this world to return to Allah. The point of life is the meeting with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's the stage of actions that we will be rewarded for. And so when they hear this all the time, this produces a consciousness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When your children see you worshipping, when they see that there is a presence of heart in the worship, they absorb this over the years. So the most of tarbiyah that children take, and this is the point I want to make, is not from what you say, but from what you do. And you and your spouse are the example of that. So children absorb they absorb the state of their parents over years. And so if you're an angry, revengeful person, then that's what they're either going to be like that or they're going to reject it. And if they reject it, that unfortunately means that they're going to reject something about you, which is not nice. Anyway, sibling squabbles. How should parents deal with daily squabbles and fights between siblings? What kind of conflict is normal and healthy, and what are signs that it is no longer healthy? Well, Sheikh has great admiration for his mother. She was a practicing Christian, a very good woman. Unfortunately, not as far as we know. She didn't accept Islam. But Allah only knows what happened in the last moments of her life. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bring about a good end for us all. So, but she was that generation in the 1950s that were raising their children. From 1960s afterward, the counterculture started to come into the concepts and Western concepts and tarbiyah. And if there was something missing in the European type tarbiyah, it was perhaps lack of affection and love. Not everybody, but I remember growing up in New Zealand, which was mostly a British culture at that time. New Zealand was the local Maori people, and we had Polynesians also from the Pacific Islands, and some, of course, variegated immigrants like we were. And then but the core of the population were people from the United Kingdom, whose origin was the British, Scottish, English-speaking culture. And so one thing that was notable when I noticed when we were growing up is that they weren't warm. Muslims are touchy-feely, they're always hugging and kissing and cuddling their children. So, and each other too, but particularly children, children in Arab countries, they're always, big families, and the little toddler goes from one person to the next, and when you get bored with them, you give them to the next guy who wants to play with them. So they get a lot of love and a lot of nurturing. Most people in most families in some countries. So, but with the lack of good emotion, apart from that, the tarbiyah and its principles was good. So in Sheikh, he always and his siblings also, they very much loved and admired their mother. And she was a very nice woman. She was more touchy-feely than most people of that background. And to give an idea of just how much of a nice and good woman she was, they lived in, Sheikh was raised in a small town. I think it was only about 2,000 people, and that was in the time of the prime of the wealth in America. So they had lots of facilities and good schools, and there was a hospital that served the region. And so they had a lot of there was a lot of farming going on around there. His grandfather was a farmer, a cattle farmer, and there was wheat farming, and so there were a lot of trains that used to come in that would pick up all the wheat and the cattle. So they used to have hobos, tramps, and so in American language they call them a bum, So it's not a polite word where we come from down under. But anyway, but an American idiomatic, the American idiomatic expression is a bum for a tramp. So Sheikh, when he was a little kid, he's maybe about 10 years old, and he used to see these hobos, getting on the trains and going from one place to another. So he comes to his mother and he says, "When I grow up, I want to be a bum." His mother, she said to him, "Well, then you be a good bum." So always encouraging, always supportive of her children. And he said that when they used to, every night, she would go to every one of her children when they went to bed, and she would tuck them in and tell them how much she loved them and how wonderful they were. And so they had Tim and his siblings had a very nurturing and loving relationship with their mother. But she was very strict. He was really strict. So, they had protocol that they had to follow. And in those days, children should be seen and not heard. You didn't interrupt adults when they were talking. And they weren't allowed to eat until their father came home. They had to just wait. And their father would come home, and they'd all sit down on the table. They'd say their grace. They still do that to this day. Many members of their family, they say their grace. So when we come, and they say the grace, but we say so his Sheikhn's brother-in-law, he teaches Catholicism in a Catholic high school. That him and his Sheikhn's sister, they're practicing Catholics. So he says the grace, and he says in the name of God and the God of Abraham. So we're all okay. So anyway, as long as they don't do anything in the name of Jesus Christ, they'll be there. Anyway, so they had this protocol. So there was very loving, caring mother, affectionate, and always expressing her love to her children. And she had a protocol when they used to fight. So this finally got to the point. so she had a big clothes brush, which she kept in the office, so if her husband's office. So if there was a fight, and she didn't ask who was right or wrong. It's like there was fighting, like proper fighting, into the office. So they go into the office, out comes the big long clothes brush, boom, 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 over. Who started it? No questions. So what happened was that the kids, they used to, like, if one beat the other and the other started crying, it's like, shh, shh, be quiet, be quiet, be quiet. Mom's gonna come. So she kept them under control like that they weren't allowed to have, all out fighting. I do think it's, if you have a yard, and unfortunately, people live in apartments these days, but when Shekna was growing up, when I was growing up too, everyone had land around their houses. And so we used to go out and just go wild outside. And it's much easier to do that when you have somewhere to go. You can go a bit wild. So, you can run and, you can bull rush, and I don't know if you remember those games, bull rush. And I remember when I was in school, we used to do bull rush in primary school. And there'd just be like a couple of 100 kids just running like maniacs, And anyway, but inside the house, this kind of fighting is it's not anyway. That's how his mother dealt with it. I'm just telling you what she did. He felt it was a great, wonderful success. And so I think this is going to be our last question. As an Eastern mother, so overwhelm and guilt as a mother, in other ways, we can just have a quick look at some of these things. So try and finish them off for everyone. As an Eastern mother living in a Western country, I often feel overwhelmed between trying to feed my daughter halal food, taking care of the house, my husband, and myself. I feel exhausted and guilty most of the time. Do you have any advice on how to manage this in a spiritually sound way? Number one, when you get married and you have children, you have to realize that as a woman that you are actually going to put out 20 years of your life of self-sacrifice. So I remember one lady, she had a baby many years ago before, while I was still in New Zealand. And so the experience, she wrote, instead, she didn't say motherhood, she said martyrhood. So, but that's what it takes. It's like a 20-year project. And you should have that in mind. If you are going to get married, so al-Khayr, our beloved al-Khayr, she frequently says, everyone wants to get married, but no one wants to be a wife. And everyone wants children, but no one, I won't say no one wants to be a mother, but, they didn't expect what was they're going to get into being a mother, because you're basically having to give your life over for some other people. And that's why the reward of parents is so great, because the parents have to make so much sacrifice to raise children, and especially the mother, so, who is the greatest right over me? Your mother. Who is the greatest? Next, your mother, and then next your mother, and then next your father. So I do advise always to people to live a simple life, and so that they have less work to do. And if you can get any machines to make your life less, to do less labor, that's great. If you can afford household help, that's fantastic. Unfortunately, in the West, you can't usually do that because it's too expensive. But this is your project. This is raising children as a project, and it takes about 20 years, because if you're having one child, then they deserve a sibling. There should be a family. So that means you're going to have another 2 or 3 at least. And so, by the time you get to the last one down the line, and until they turn about 13 and they sort of have some autonomy, you're the one doing all the work. But going back to the beginning of our talk here, when I said I gathered all those ladies together and I told them that these children don't belong to you, they belong to Allah, and their faces all dropped, and they all sort of eyes widened, and their mouths dropped and their eyes widened. So, oh, I didn't think of that. And so another interesting thing that I told them, because this was one of the things that I was seeing, was that there was a lot of slave labor going on from the mother. And I said, listen, guys, I said, by the time your daughters, are, even your boys, 10 years old, they should be doing all the housework. And they all just looked at me like I was saying something like, there are people living on the moon. And I said, listen, when I was 10 years old, I did everything. And there were Arab and Turkish women there also at the same time. And so I asked them, I said, were you doing all the housework by the time you were 10? They said, yeah, we were doing everything. And then the Turkish lady said, when I was 7 years old, I was doing this and this and this. And so as soon as your children are able and capable of doing something, you start giving them chores. So, when they're like 5 years old, they should have chores. Okay, teach them how to fold towels. And you teach them over and over again, and you sit there with them until they get it, and then they know how to do it properly, and that's their chore. I knew a Western lady married to an Arab man. She was a convert, and she had quite a few children. And so when her little toddlers were about 3 years old or so, she gave them a job that they would stand on a little stool, and their job was to wipe the doorknobs. Because when you've got tons of kids in the house, they always have gook on their hands, and then they open the doors and the door handles had gook on them. Mm-hmm. So this little kiddie, his job was to do that. And so everyone has to have chores. There's Sheikh Noor's household that used to hate their chores, but it's okay. There are a lot of things in life that you don't like. Mm-hmm. But his mother would revolve the chores. There were 3 boys and 1 girl. So there was a list of chores. This is 4 lists. Mm-hmm. And so Sheikh Noor's mother had her children one after another. So I think there's only a year and a half between each one. And so there would be 4 lists of chores, and they would revolve. Each week, the chore list would revolve, so you'd get all of the chores within 1 month. In our house, in my family's household, I was the only girl, and I had 2 brothers. So I used to do all the inside work, and they used to have to do all the outside work. So you can relieve yourself. And so you've got to be organized. Don't have a lot of junk, so you're not serving your junk. And teach your kids how to work. Okay, and so we have here pregnancy, birth, and newborn care. I would advise you to go back to the Raising Muslim Children. We translated from Sheikh Hassan al-Hindi, things to do before marriage, when you get married, when you have during pregnancy, when the child is born. So there's lots of ideas there. What are some reliable, beneficial books on parenting that you would recommend for new Muslim parents? Only books that I recommend for parenting are the books that go back to the old way that children used to raise their children with teaching them manners and discipline. So I don't like modern parenting books. That's what started the whole Raising Muslim Children series that we did together. And I gave examples, I think, from some of those books, because they're teaching children bad akhlaq. It's like, one of the examples I gave to everyone, which is a really common thing that people do, it's like asking a 5-year-old, what do you want to eat? It's like, why are you asking a 5-year-old what he wants to eat? You're teaching him that the world revolves around him. I said, people only do that if they don't have a family. Imagine you've got 5 or 6 kids like most Muslim families, and you're going to ask every single one of them, okay, what do you want? What do you want? What is this, a restaurant? So you teach them, this is what your food is now. Can you please eat it? Sometimes it's not good to force kids to eat something they hate. Like when my brothers and I, there's no way that my mother, she tried to fool us that kidney was meat, and there's no way that, liver was meat, and we just hated liver. There's just no way we could eat it. We just wouldn't eat it. So, forcing them to eat something that they really, really dislike, is not a good thing. But If you know that your kids, just can't eat liver, don't shove it down their throats. But at the same time, this is what modern tarbiyah books are about. It's all about the nafs, making someone feel important. Whereas Islam, where you're not unimportant, you're loved and you're given a place, that the world doesn't revolve around you. We're not cultivating nafs. We're cultivating a noble human being. So anyway, everyone, a single mother's tarbiyah, how should a single mother think about and approach her children's tarbiyah on these issues where there is no support from the father? Do your best and make tons of dua. Do your best. And when you turn to Allah and ask Him for everything that you need, Allah will help you. And role of wealth in Islamic upbringing. Does having ample financial means help with Islamic tarbiyah, for example, by allowing families to avoid dependence on state systems, choose better environments or homeschool? What role should wealth play in applying the principles of an Islamic upbringing? When wealth is a means, should not be a goal. So we have our rizq from Allah, we work. We're not working night and day, so we forget about Allah and we forget about the point of having a quality, noble family life. But if you have money, you have the means to have private lessons, to have better education. So use your money well and ask Allah for tawfiq. Positions of power in the West. For Muslims living in the West, should we actively seek positions of influence and authority so we do not feel inferior, or are there spiritual risks we should be mindful of in doing so? As Muslims, we should try and benefit our societies and our ummah to the best of our ability in any way. So Sultan Baba, he was in Turkey, he lived through the whole Ataturk era, which was an effort, a secular effort to destroy Islam. And he considered that anyone who was in any position of influence whatsoever, whether he's working in the city council or a teacher or any position, if they're trying to uphold their duty for the sake of Islam and be an example of Islam and promote Islam, then he considered them to be a mujahid. Parents' weak pronunciation. If one parent has weak or incorrect pronunciation of Quran, should he or she recite silently until the pronunciation is corrected? Or is it still beneficial to recite loud in front of the children? The children will have their own, if they have their own teacher, they won't be, inshallah, affected by your weak pronunciation. But learning to recite the Quran properly is a wajib. So, and at least you have to know how to recite what concerns your prayer. And I do encourage people. There are a lot of online Quran teaching these days. So I do advise people to try and find a teacher or a school that they can join or a class to improve their pronunciation and tajweed of the Quran. And this is our last. Some participants are in time zones where the live session will be very early, for example, 3:30 a.m. Will a recording of the event be available for those who cannot attend live? Yes, inshallah. Yes, and inshallah. And barakallahu fikum, everybody. That is the end of our talk today. Inshallah, we went an extra half an hour, it seems. Yes, we did. Anyway, it's very worth it. We were having fun, inshallah. Inshallah, barakallahu fikum, everybody, and may Allah give you all lots of tawfiq. It is not easy to raise children in our times, regardless of whether you are in East or West. However, everything can be made a lot easier when you make a lot of dua and depend on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so from the hikam of Ibn Ata'illah Iskandari, nothing is difficult that you seek through your Lord, and nothing is easy that you seek through yourself. So always ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala again and again and again and again and again and again and again, and night and day and at every point, and never tire asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for his help. because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala hears us when we call on Him. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has promised us that He hears the dua of He answers the dua, not that He answers the dua of the mubtar. And the mubtar is the one who's like his really deep need. It's like when you're just asking Allah from the bottom of your heart to please help you. Subhanallah. I've never found that I've made that dua in a moment of great need, except that something will come up, something will happen, something will be answered. So you have a very difficult job. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did not give Sheikh Noor and I children from His hikmah. And as we got older and we watched everyone else raising their children, I said, oh, maybe, it wasn't such a bad thing that we didn't have children. Because not that we wanted to have children, but that was the qadr of Allah. And but when I saw the hardships, so many people who really sincerely tried their best to raise their children, in this time where the children have so many options to go off course, it is really, really, really not easy. So may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give you all tawfiq. And when I do advise everybody, ittaqullah mastata'tum, fear Allah as much as you're able, because when you have taqwallah, you have inayah or care and protection from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that's your greatest hope, that Allah takes your affair in His hands and helps you and guides you and protects your families. So to finish where we started, the core of the successful tarbiyah and raising of children is in the taqwa and the akhlaq of the parents. And by always returning to Allah and trying to please Him, following His Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, there is the means for success. That's the means for success. Your own tie to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, your own taqwa, your own adab, your own akhlaq. Walhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen.
Alhamdulillah. We want to begin by thanking Sahl for taking the time to be with us today and for her gentle, honest reminders about the trust we carry in raising our children. May Allah reward her, increase her in health and tawfiq, and allow these words to bear fruit in our homes. And to all of you who joined from different time zones and busy lives, Jazakallah khair. The fact that you gave this hour a bit more for the sake of your children's deen is itself a sign, inshallah, of Allah's mercy and care for them. A gathering like this is beautiful, but it is only a beginning. What really matters now is what happens quietly afterwards, in our routines, in our duha, and in the way we bring the Qur'an and its meanings into the daily life of our families. At Sufuuf al-Khayr, Rows of Goodness, this is exactly what we are trying to do, helping parents, especially in Western environments, give their children a living relationship with the Qur'an and its language in a way that is structured but gentle. Our work is very simple at heart. We teach Qur'an recitation and memorization with care and correct tajweed. We teach classical Arabic for kids alongside the Qur'an so that over time the words they recite begin to carry meaning in their hearts. And we do this in small focused sessions that respect how full family life already is. If today's conversation has stirred something in you and you're wondering what should be our next step as a family, we'd be happy to speak with you personally. We're offering a free placement consultation or trial session for families who attended this event, to understand your child's age and background, to listen to where you'd like them to be, and to suggest a realistic starting point in Qur'an, Arabic, or both. I'll place the link in the chat now, inshallah, so you can book a time that suits your schedule. If the link doesn't work for you for any reason, you can simply visit rosesofgoodness.com and reach out through the site. We are also preparing bi'idhnillah a Ramadan bootcamp for kids, a gentle month-long program with basic fiqh of fasting, aqidah, seerah, character-building stories, and nasheed, to help children live Ramadan with understanding and joy. More details will be shared soon with everyone who registered for this event. We ask Allah to place blessings in your children, to protect their hearts, and to make the Qur'an the light of your home and the spring of their hearts. Jazakallah khair once again to our honored guest, and to all of you who attended. Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.